Hi, I'm Casey Bell, and you're watching Writer to Writer Interviews. Welcome to a special Christmas episode of Writer to Writer Interviews. I am your host, Casey Bell, and this episode's writers are Rena Leith and Randy Overbeck. Let's get started.
Hey, good afternoon, Rena.
Hi, Randy.
Hey, let's. I really enjoyed your Christmas cozy and a corpse for Christmas, and I thought it would be fun to ask a few questions about. Um, how about this one for a start? Now, this is your third entry in your Cassie Peak series.
Yes, it is.
Was there any particular reason you chose to make this entry a Christmas mystery?
I just plain love Christmas. There are some practical reasons, though. If you're going to have corpses show up, it's kind of nice to balance them with a little holiday cheer, some hot chocolate, some cookies, that sort of thing. Also, I led up to this in a way. The first book that I wrote, Murder Beach, was actually set pre-Labor Day. And hadn't really thought about the timing much, but when it came time to write the second book, Coastal Corpse, notice the pumpkin, I just moved along into fall and created a Halloween mystery. So naturally, the Christmas mystery followed right on there, A Corpse for Christmas.
That sounds like a great idea. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book itself. One of the things I noticed, which is not uncommon in a cozy, that you have some nice recipes included in Christmas recipes that you've included with your tale. I'm curious, are these your personal recipes? Do you enjoy cooking like your characters do in the book? Is that something that's you?
I do love cooking. I'm mostly a fish, nuts, vegetables, and fruit sort of a person. So I experiment a lot with spices. I'm not a big fan of salt, but I like playing around. Roasted vegetables with rosemary and thyme, for example. However, when I really mess up, I mess up badly. So I didn't include any of that in the book. But most of the recipes actually are my brother-in-law's. My brother-in-law and sister ran Leith Hall down in Cape May, a bed and breakfast for
Oh yeah.
over 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had to cook every day. So the cream cheese and dill scrambled eggs are his. Adding a touch of orange flavoring to chocolate chip cookies, that's also his. The big one in Corpse for Christmas, Eight Treasure Duck, however, comes from some Hawaiian friends. Same people who gave me the idea for George Ho as the hero detective in the series.
Oh, great. Oh, well, and now personally, I like vegetables a lot, and I haven't tried it yet, and I'm the cook in our family. But your vegetable medley sounded really, really good. I'm going to try that.
Oh,
That
good.
I kept that recipe after I read the book, so I appreciate that. Based on the experience of writing a Christmas mystery, do you have any advice for somebody who wants to try to blend, the cozy with a Christmas mystery of what works or what doesn't work, you think?
Actually, after writing this, I've come to the conclusion that it's a great combination. So you can balance a little bit the horror of somebody dying, or in some cases, more than one person, even in a cozy, with a little bit of that holiday cheer, the uplifting spirit of the time of year. So I would suggest that they shouldn't neglect the mystery, though, but throw in as a counterpoint, don't slow the pace down, but just a little bit of counterpoint of Christmas cheer with some good food and give it a twist. Maybe your family background is includes another country like Italy or the Philippines, and you might want to put a little cultural twist in there, something a little different to make it stand out from the pack.
That sounds like a good idea. I thought it was a very fun, uh, light Christmas mystery. Enjoyed reading it. I was particularly taken with your unusual use of the two of your characters, Doris and Thor. I don't want to do any spoilers here, but I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about how you came up with that little nifty twist that you use in the book, uh, without giving things away.
Well, my ghost is more of a Topper style ghost from the Thor and Smith books, as opposed to all the really good research you did for the ghosts in your series. But I still use some of the limitations, shall we say. So I put a perimeter around her. Most ghosts tend to haunt a certain place, and so the same is true for her. But then I discovered I wanted her to be able to go out, to help, to explore. So I gave her a vehicle, and that was Thor. So just as ghosts are known to inhabit humans, possess them, she can possess animals. And so when she's combined with Thor, I use the combined name of Doris and Thor, but I used it because Edgar Rice Burroughs was one of my favorite authors as a child, and I really, really like Dejah Thoris, the Princess of Mars. So that's where that comes from.
I found that very, very cute. So, you have a nice array of characters in the three book series. Do you have a favorite from that book, from that series? You want to share with, and why is Cassie your favorite, or George your favorite? You want to tell us about that?
It is very hard to pick. When I see George, I picture Daniel Day Kim, and so he's definitely a favorite. Cass, of course, is my viewpoint character. But over time, Doris really has become my favorite character, and she's partially based on my mother, her sort of escapades. When my mother was young, she was dating a guy, and neither one had much money, and they were living in Chicago. And the Edgewater Beach Hotel had free food and drink inside the wall, but you had to pay to get in. So they climbed the wall for the free food and drink. So Doris is that kind of character.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And we should remind the readers, Doris is your ghost.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Doris is my ghost.
That's like I said, if I found it a very fun diversion, I thought, and if people are looking for a fun Christmas cozy, they would do well to pick up your book. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Rena Leith. I'm the author of the Cass Peak Mystery Series, and you can find my latest book, A Corpse for Christmas, at my website, renaleith.com. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Cass Peak's web design company accepts a job to bolster the local college efforts in attracting new students. With the winter break, she and her colleagues expect a very quiet campus. What they don't anticipate is the reunion of a strange secret society called the Black Triangle Club on the grounds. And a dead body. Wild Rose Press presents A Corpse for Christmas by Rena Leith, available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Randy, I was really struck by how multi-pronged your research is. You've obviously had to research different location for each book. You have a different time period, so you have to research the location during that time period. Why did you decide to do those two things? It means extra work for you.
It does. You're right. Well, let me answer the time question first, because the answer is far more practical. When I began the series, I had decided that I wanted to start the narrative of my character with a story about racial injustice. So in Blood on the Chesapeake, the story eventually revolves around a cold case murder mystery that, although the protagonist doesn't know it at first, turns out to be a lynching. The latest, from my research, the latest I found that lynchings occurred in the US were in the early to middle 60s. So that set the anchor part of the story in that particular time. If I wanted my villains to be young people at that time, then and then to be able to be powerful individuals in the town later, I figured that would have to be when they were in their 50s. So I simply did the math from the early 60s to the late 90s and came up with the 1998 reason. So I never really, to be honest, until I started doing all the research you mentioned, I hadn't thought about all those other things. So then what I had to do once I decided on the location was I had to, okay, well, like the stores and the restaurants that are mentioned in there, I had to make sure all of those existed in 98 as well as in, the ones that I was able to go see. And in each case, in each of the locations, that's what I've done. Now, I was very fortunate. I got to work with the Chamber of Commerce people in each case, and many times they have the history of, well, this was this and that time, and that's how I was able to do that. Now, all the research required on the, getting on site and learning people, meeting people, um, but I also had the help of the locals to be able to give me that kind of insight. And in fact, we actually launched the first book in the restaurant that's mentioned in Blood on the Chesapeake, which has been in existence since 1798 or something like that. So that was great fun. My to for people watching, the name of the place is called the Robert Morris Inn. He's actually one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. My wife and I just ate there this past week, and it's just as great now as it was 20 years earlier.
Wow. Speaking of research, did you actually talk to ghost hunters? Your ghosts are very realistic. In my books, mine are more fantasy type, but I was taken by it's hard to say accuracy when you're dealing with ghosts.
But that's exactly what I'm striving for. All of us writers are trying to find a niche that our books can fit in. And I have read a lot of ghost stories, many of them like yours, which are fanciful ghosts, almost always in cozies, and it's really a lot of fun. And then the other category of ghost stories tend to be like Stephen King and Dean Koontz and Shirley Jackson, where the ghosts are horrible and scary and terrifying. But when I did my research on ghosts, I found that most often ghosts are, as the Buddhists say, suffering spirits. They're ghosts stuck between this world and the next with some kind of problem that they're trying to get out of or solve or get around, or sometimes they're just plain stuck. And I work very, very hard. And the answer to your question is yes. In fact, I got my first interest in doing ghosts by attending a session at a writing conference put on by a ghost hunting group. And the evidence that they shared with me, the scientific stuff that they had, was just incredible. I'm going, there's no way you could fake this. This was absolutely remarkable. And then I did a lot more research with them and with some other groups of, well, exactly what is it that goes, what is the real? What do we have evidence of versus what is fanciful or just imaginary? And I try very hard now. I do take liberties. It's fiction. It's not nonfiction. But I try very hard that the way the ghosts appear to humans in my story and interact with humans is what we've had documentations of how they occur. So, for example, in two of the stories, the ghosts appear in some kind of video or still picture. And the individuals involved didn't see them at the time. Well, that actually is a very common occurrence that we're taking a photograph. Nobody sees the ghost when they take the photograph, and then when they develop it or digitally finish it, the ghost suddenly appears. So yes, I try to keep that as close to possible.
Okay. Also, I've noticed that you use a variety of women different ages, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultural ethnicities, but you draw them all so well and very individually. And then you have this hot romance going on between Daryl and Aaron. I was wondering if you're using it as a counterpoint to the violence, or is there another reason?
Well, I mean, I work very hard to portray the characters as authentically as I possibly can. I've had, and the only way I'm able to do that is I have a lot of help. So I have a lot of readers, beta readers. I don't have a lot. I have several beta readers and my writers group that give me feedback on a woman wouldn't talk like that. A young girl wouldn't think like that. So all of those issues have been vetted by people that know a whole lot more than I do. I don't pretend to be a 16-year-old goth girl, which is one of my point of view characters in Crimson at Cape May. So I didn't really do that. In the Christmas book, Scarlet at Crystal River, I chose to have a Hispanic uh, assistant helper for for Daryl and Aaron, my protagonists. And again, in that case, I actually went and made sure all of my accents were right. I made sure that the way that person would express, I went to Hispanic people to make sure that all of those things were as accurate as I could possibly get, and that the way the attitude that that person projects fits within that nationality. Um, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of for each of the books, and that's, to be honest, it's one of those stretches. So I'm sitting there going, okay, well, what can I do that's different for this book that I didn't do in the previous book?
Hmm. And you mentioned that your novels have multiple points of view. Mine have a single point of view. I was wondering what advantage you feel the multiple points of view gives you, and what advice you'd give other writers who want to use multiple points of view.
Well, multiple points of view is always more difficult because that means that you have to create two authentic persons speaking. Not, I mean, yours are first person, mine's third person, deep third person, but the effect is still the same. So, one of the things that I worked at, for example, in Crimson at Cape May, is I have Daryl, my protagonist, my central protagonist, who's a 25, 26-year-old male teacher, something that I could fairly easily get into the head of because I've been there and done that. And then my second POV is this 16-year-old runaway who's a goth. Well, and I really struggled to be able to make sure that I was able to do that. So one of the things first thing I would do is I would make sure, if you look at the difference between really good writers and okay writers, when they switch POVs, the okay writer, you often can't tell where one POV stops and the next one begins. So I try to make sure that the POV is very different and what's projected is different. Um, and I work really hard on that. Everything from language to adjectives to exactly what the person, even cuss words are often different from one POV to the other. The advantage, is there an advantage to it? I think the advantage is that it broadens the world that you're creating in the story. So yes, doing at Crimson at Cape May or even Scarlet at Crystal River, I could have told the story without ever getting inside Luis's or my other character's head, Cassie's head. But by letting the reader hear the words of the 16-year-old coming from her head, I think helps anchor the story and helps give a broader perspective on the story. It probably added months of writing in my case because it took that much longer to get that the way it needed to be. But I think in the end, it's worth it, I think.
Wow. Well, your books are all based with a core of a social justice issue, such as human trafficking and plight of migrant workers. I think this is unique and adds gravitas to your work, but how do you choose those issues And what techniques do you use to weave the social justice issue into the plot line?
When I am, one of the reasons that I decided I wanted to create a series that was not in one place, as you mentioned in the first question, um, one of the things that I wanted to look at was to make sure that first of all, I like the idea. It allows me to travel to all these places and learn about new places that I had never been. Before the pandemic, or slightly before the pandemic, I'd never been to Crystal River before. It was a new place to me. So in addition to the personal advantages of doing that, what I was trying to do was give a flavor for really wonderful little places that people don't know about. That was part of my goal. So I'm hoping that some readers end up picking up the books because, well, I never heard of Crystal River. You can swim with manatee. I want to read this story to find that out. So that was part of it. When it comes to figuring out the connection, I look at the area where I'm setting the story, and I have to make sure that the social issue evolves naturally from the location. So in Blood on the Chesapeake, in the first book, which is located on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay, a place I dearly love, my wife and I return to there often. I was at first surprised and then later understood it's a place with a real dichotomy so part of the culture is very Confederate, very redneck, and part of the culture is very New England and very progressive. And those cultures are at war in that place. So I thought, well, what a perfect place to set a racial injustice issue. And to be fair, I learned in my research, there were a couple of lynchings that occurred on the eastern shore. In the case of the Cape May location, Cape May is actually located near one of the largest human trafficking networks in the world. The shipping networks are also human trafficking networks, and the New Jersey, the Garden State Parkway, Pennsylvania Turnpike, all of that are really big shipping areas, which of course makes them human trafficking. And in the case of I had decided I wanted to go to Florida for the third story. I had decided I wanted it to be a Christmas set in Florida. And then I was searching for, well, what would make sense? And then when I went down there, it was very obvious that it had to be the story about migrant workers. Because when I did the research of what their lives are like, I thought, oh, this has got to be something that can be tied to one of my murders. And it kind of grows. I try to make it so that the issue grows organically from what Daryl's not interested in learning about migrant workers when he goes down there. He's interested in having a honeymoon. But because he gets involved with trying to find out what happened to these two children who are murdered, and then kind of backs into learning about the world of migrant workers, then I'm hoping my reader will go with Daryl and go, oh, I didn't know this. And have the same experience I had this is what these people go through to give us strawberries and celery and spinach and sitting on our grocery shelves every day we go in. Hi, I'm Randy Overbeck, author of Scarlet at Crystal River, which is the third entry in my Haunted Shore Mysteries book, and also happens to be a ghost story and Christmas mystery. You can find information about my books and me at my website. That's authorrandyoverbeck.com. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
And we are back. Let's get back into the conversation. All right, so we're going to start with Rena. Same question, and then Randy, you can follow.
Okay.
When did you first discover writing as far as something you enjoyed?
I think it started in junior high school with an English teacher, Mrs. McDougall, who had been a reporter before she became a teacher. And she stressed finding the story. Now, she was focusing more on nonfiction, but the idea was that it isn't just facts. There's a story behind, the real people behind. So I started that way, but I didn't realize that fiction novels were created by human beings right away. I made the connection with newspapers because of her, but not that people produce novels. I don't know what I thought, that they dropped out of the sky. But the minute I put those two ideas together, then I was writing stories, really bad ones to start out with, and oddly, mostly ghost stories. But it's been developing over the years. And finally, I decided, let's get serious. Wild Rose Press put out a call for ghost stories. So it all ties together. And they bought my book, Murder Beach.
Awesome. Randy, same question.
I think mine is similar to stories to Rena. I started, actually, mine was probably high school instead of junior high, and also prompted by an excellent creative writing teacher, as a matter of fact, and wrote my first stories there. Early on, going from high school to college, I actually played with the idea of being, quote, a writer and trying to do that for a living. But then I kind of quickly got got a dose of reality. And to be honest, I was called to teach. So uh, during that time, I spent I spent 39 years as an educator. I I'm happy to say that in education, you do a ton of writing, so it wasn't like my writing languished. But then about 15, a little more than 15 years ago, I started to move from all of the technical and nonfiction writing that I've been doing for my work to starting to write fiction. And then it just kind of took off from there. I've been seriously at it for the last about 8 years and really enjoy that part now.
All right, Randy. There are, I don't know the exact number, I'll just say hundreds of genres in fiction. What led you specifically to murder mystery?
Well, what we have found out is that writers generally write what they love to read. And my most common, if I'm picking up a book, I'm almost always picking up either a mystery or a thriller. So my interest kind of led me in that particular direction. And then I found out that as I read more and more of the genre, I kind of was able to absorb, well, how this works. How do you put the puzzle together? How do you fix a whodunit so that it grabs the reader's interest and able to hold them through the end of the story? And then when I started working on it, I found out that was halfway decent at it. With help from a lot of other people, was able to create a pretty decent mystery that was complemented by the ghost story. But I'm always looking at expanding into others. My next book, I have another mystery in the process, and then after that, I'm going to go back to thriller. So I'm always looking to try something new.
Cool. Rena, same question.
I think it's pretty much what Randy said about you write what you're interested in reading. And two of my favorite authors are Agatha Christie and John Dixon Carr, primarily because of the puzzles involved. John Dixon Carr was also known as Carter Dixon, was the master of the locked room mystery, for example. Yeah. But the first story I actually had published was a fantasy story called Loaded Dice, and it was about a deal with the devil. I think I would write in multiple genres, but I enjoy the cozy because I like being in the mystery. I create the world and I live in it while I'm writing the book.
Cool. So, as you said, when you were reading books in school, you didn't realize humans wrote them. So, when you read a book and you've never published a book, you don't know the process of what went into that book getting into your hand. So first, Rena, when you first started publishing your book, just name one thing that completely shocked you that you had no clue was a part of the steps of getting a book published.
That I had to promote it, and how to go about that, which was a complete mystery to me. I'm still struggling with how to promote, how to reach the people who would be intrigued by my book. And I sometimes have a kind of a dark sense of humor. So while I was getting ready for this, it came to me that I could set up an ad. I don't know that I'd sell any books with it, but I could say, are you Christmas shopping? Are you finding all the shelves bare and empty? How about a corpse for Christmas? Available from Amazon.
Well, I like the idea. So
I do too. It's great.
same question, Randy.
What's the question again? I was so much enjoying your answer, I forgot the question.
What was the one thing? I'm sure there were many.
One
Thing
thing.
that shocked you
Yeah.
about publishing,
Well,
writing or publishing.
I have to let everybody know that I have friends that have successfully done the indie route, but I had decided I did not want to do that. I didn't want to fool with those, be responsible for some of those technical aspects. So I had decided I wanted to hook up with somebody who was an actual publisher. I thought that gave my book more gravitas, and more importantly, it took care of the issues that I didn't want to deal with. So I was, and like everybody else, I wanted to be the next great American author. I thought I had a good, workable story. I thought it was worth it. So I worked very hard to try to find an agent. And this is not an exaggeration because I kept track of this. I sent 100 query letters to individual agents that I had selected ahead of time that expressed an interest in my genre. And I got probably a dozen of those 100 agents were actually expressed an interest and looked at and wanted to do, give me partial, give me the whole manuscript. But in the end, none of them said they wanted it. And you need an agent to go to one of the big publishers. When that didn't work out, I went and researched small publishers and ended up with the one that Rena and I are both published with, which is Wild Rose Press, which is a great small publisher. But to finish the story, what surprised me was I had no idea how hard it was going to be from here's a really good, serviceable manuscript to here's somebody who really is interested in actually publishing it. My book, the first book I was trying to get published, became a #1 bestseller this summer, but I still couldn't get an agent to go, oh, that sounds good. I think if people are not used to that, they will be stunned at how difficult that is.
I know many people quit because they send out so many letters and get rejected. And sometime last year I was on Twitter, and someone who is a literary agent for a book publishing company, some new book came out and it became a bestseller, and he read it. And as he was reading it, he realized it was a book he actually rejected. And so it was a book he now realized he should not have rejected. And I thought that was brave of him to say that, because now people realize it doesn't mean your work is bad. It just means for whatever reason in their life at that moment in time, it just wasn't the right thing. Or maybe, I know it may seem like, oh, everyone goes to work 100%. Some people don't. They go there and they're not 100% paying attention to what's going on. And they're not really reading because something happened at home and they're thinking about that. And it doesn't mean you're not good. It just means that wasn't it. So I hope most people realize, don't quit. If you truly believe, even if one person says you're good, then you're good. Everyone is not going to like you, and everyone is not supposed to like you.
Well,
there's an audience out there for you.
It would do well for your viewers to remember, The Martian. Nobody wanted that book, and that became such a huge bestseller. John Grisham says he has a wall of his office papered with rejection slips from agents and editors. You can name author after author who was rejected again and again and again and just stayed at it because they believed in themselves.
Right.
So but it's hard. My point is, you got to be willing to put in the work and the time because it isn't easy.
I believe it's because we're taught if you go to college and get a job, well, once you go to college, everything's going to be easy. You graduate, you're going to get everything immediately, and so we're not taught that most times it takes time and that you're not going to see anything overnight, and people just need to learn that that's a fact you can't change. So my last question for you, and you kind of said something already. I'm going to ask it anyways. We're going to start with Randy. If you had the opportunity to meet an author, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, wow. That's really hard. I think the best author that I've ever read anywhere is William Shakespeare, without a doubt. Considering how young he died and what the body of work he was able to produce that no one's ever. But the fact of being able to meet him, spend an evening with him, spend time, talk about his creative process and how he was able to do that, I think would be more beneficial than any other author, even though I have lots of other ones that I read more readily. I would love to sit down and talk with Bill.
Bill. And what about you, Rena?
Oh my. I think Daphne du Maurier, who wrote, again, here's part of my theme, one of my favorite ghost stories called The Uninvited.
Oh yeah, I've read it.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for you today on Writer to Writer Interviews. I want to thank my guests, Rena Leith and Randy Overbeck, for being on the show. And I want to thank you for watching. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Have a great day. Are you a guest looking for a host to interview you? Or are you a host looking for guests to interview? Radio Guest List is the website for you. It's a free listing of guests looking for shows to interview them, as well as a free listing of shows looking for guests. Whether you're looking for a guest to interview or shows to interview you, go to radioguestlist.com.